Phung Huynh, is that your last name? Pronounce it right? Huynh. Phung Huynh is a LA, Los Angeles-based artist and educator whose practice includes drawing, painting, public art, and community engagement. Her work explores cultural perception and representation. Quinn challenges beauty standards by constructing images of the Asian female body vis-a-vis plastic surgery to unpack how contemporary cosmetic surgery can whitewash culture and racial identity. Her work of drawings on pink donut boxes explores the complexity of assimilation and cultural negotiation among Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees who have resettled in the United States. Phung Huynh has had also exhibitions at Gagosian Gallery in Beverly Hills and Sweeney Art Gallery at the University of California, Riverside. Her paintings and drawings have been exhibited nationally and internationally, including spaces such as the US Embassy in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. She has also completed public art commissions for Metro Orange Line, Metro Silver Line, the LA Zoo, and the Los Angeles County USC Medical Center through the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture. Phung Huynh is a professor of art at Los Angeles Valley College, where her focus is on serving disproportionately impacted students. She is chair of the Public Art Commission for the City of South Pasadena and has served as chair of the community-based art Prison Arts Collective Advisory Council, which advises a vital program that provides art courses and workshops to underserved communities and prisons. She completed undergraduate coursework at the University of Southern California, received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree with distinction from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and received her Master of Fine Arts degree from New York University. Please welcome artist Phung Huynh.
Thank you. The Zoom thing is still weird. I'm just gonna warn you, my dog may bark, okay? It's gonna happen. But thank you. I know y'all very busy and maybe even have Zoom fatigue, so I appreciate you being here. And I'm not gonna judge you if you don't have your camera on, but when you feel comfortable, please feel free to, but you don't have to. Love students, thank you for coming here. And I just wanna give some shout out to my friends, Anne-Le, who teaches at LMU, awesome artist, and Rebecca Hall, badass curator, as well as Karen Rapp at the Levan Gallery. Thank you for coming here. My dear friend Marie, and my godfather, David Jorgensen, is here, who sponsored my family to come to the United States, is here today. So Uncle Dave, thank you so much for being here. I love that this is a small, intimate group. So at any time, I don't want to feel like I'm lecturing at you. Ask me questions. And after I'm done sharing my work, please, like, ask me anything, almost anything. I don't know, let's see what you ask, okay? So if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen with you first and share my work with you all. Can y'all see my screen? Yeah, awesome. So as mentioned, I am an artist, educator, mother, and activist based in Los Angeles. How I identify myself sometimes is disrupted by how others try to identify me. And I often get the question, where are you from? How many of you get this question? Raise your hands. How many of you get this question? Where are you from? You know, and sometimes like, how do you respond to that, right? Thank you. I see some hands. Where are you from? I usually say I'm from Los Angeles and let the questioner sit in it for a bit, especially when I know what the question is really trying to ask. To best describe how I feel about this complicated and loaded question, I want to play a track from Ruby Ibarra's debut album, circa 91. How many of you heard of Ruby Ibarra? If not, check her out. She's on Spotify and all platforms. Ibarra is a Panay American or Filipina spoken word and rap artist from the Bay Area. She is also a scientist and activist whose work centers on BIPOC and feminist empowerment. So I want to play you a track.
just been cleared to land at Oakland International Airport. Please make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened.
That was a quick flight, huh?
Yeah, it was a lot shorter than I expected.
So you were in DC?
Yeah, I was there for the weekend for a college conference.
What were you doing out there?
Spoken word and rap. I do that on the side.
Oh, nice. You're a performer.
Yeah, I perform on the weekends.
Oh, cool.
Usually.
Cool. So where are you from originally?
Right now I live in San Lorenzo, the East Bay.
Okay, but I mean, like before that, where are you from?
Well, before San Lorenzo, I was living in Hayward, so yeah. But I've been living in the Bay Area for pretty much my entire life.
Yeah, but where's your family from? I guess.
Yeah, my family's from San Lorenzo too.
Oh, okay, but like you're not. I mean, like originally where you're from, like ethnically, I guess. Where are you from?
Filipino.
Oh, Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta compliment you on your English. It's perfect.
So I'm going to let that sit for a bit for you all, especially those of you who can relate to that question that's being asked. So I am not from here in the sense that this is not my birthplace, but I was born in Vietnam and raised in America. This is my photograph from a refugee camp in Thailand that was used for resettlement documents. Karen, you have your hand up? These are drawings I made of my parents. My father survived the genocide in Cambodia. My mother and I were both born in Vietnam, where my father sought asylum, and as a family, we were war refugees. We resettled in the United States when I was a toddler and learned to speak English by watching Mr. Rogers on television. So I speak several languages, and my cultural identity is this slippery combination of Cambodian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and American, but never in equal parts. My work is informed by this complicated negotiation of cultural, ethnic, and racial identity. I grew up in LA immigrant neighborhoods where locating identity is in constant cultural flux. When my parents started to work in the garment industry in the 1980s, we met my abuelita, who was second generation Mexican American and grew up in East LA. She was a production manager for a company my parents made clothes for. She stood up for my parents when they were berated for not speaking English, and she convinced my parents to allow me to pursue art. This is my mentor, Charles Daly. He's an African-American artist and Vietnam War veteran who grew up in Brooklyn. During the summer, he would visit his grandmother in Virginia, taking the bus and crossing that intense Mason-Dixon line. He came into adulthood during the civil rights era and was influential in planting the seeds of social justice for me. Now, because he is a Vietnam War vet and I am a war refugee from Vietnam, our relationship healed the wounds of assimilating in this country for me. Mr. Daly introduced me to African-American artists and the importance of Black history. One of his greatest heroes, also who was influential for me, is W.E.B. Du Bois, a prominent intellectual, founder of the NAACP, and forefather who laid the groundwork for the civil rights movement. What resonates with me about his work is the book, The Souls of Black Folk, that was published in 1903. And I put up the quote for you, but what resonated with me particularly in this book is when he talks about double consciousness and the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness. So this two-ness, this constant negotiation with how I perceive myself and how others perceive me continues to linger in my psyche. Just a year after I was born, Edward Said, a displaced Palestinian scholar, writer, and professor at Columbia University, published Orientalism. For me, this work confronts double consciousness for a person who inhabits an Asian body. It reminds us that the Orient is not an actual place, but it exists in the European imagination, and the Oriental is the demeaned body that exists as other. Mining from Said's scholarship, I began to make a body of work that considers this idea of Orientalism as a type of orientation, perspective or disorientation to unpack cultural displacement, assimilation, and stereotype. This painting that I did in 2009 called Sweet and Sour Pork illustrates cultural duality and double consciousness through the lens of stereotype. Sweet and sour sauce is not authentic Chinese cuisine, but was made up here in the United States to make Chinese food more palatable for white Americans. Sweet and sour are personified as Siamese twin babies with a long braided queue that can also reference pigtails. The painting that I just showed you also gestures at this famous photograph of the Siamese twins, where now when we see conjoined twins, we call them Siamese twins. Born in 1811 on a riverboat at a fishing village in Siam, as Thailand was then called, Chang and Eng were joined at the base of their chests by a band of flesh. They were actually ethnically Chinese, and at the age of 13 in 1829, the American ship Captain Abel Coffin tricked them into signing a contract and brought them to the West for a touring exhibition as freaks of nature. The imagery that inspired the painting Sweet and Sour Pork borrows from the 19th century racist cartoons that endorsed the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This act was the first federal law that banned an entire ethnic group from immigrating to the United States. This law that prohibited Chinese immigration, and particularly male laborers, was not repealed until 1943. Eventually, I started to think about my cultural displacement as an Asian woman growing up in America, playing with Barbie dolls with blonde hair and blue eyes, and never seeing people who look like me on television. And it conditioned me to believe that white is right and white is pretty. In my series of work called Pretty Hurts, I started to challenge Western beauty standards and observe how contemporary cosmetic surgery on Asian bodies can whitewash cultural, ethnic, and racial identity. So what I'm showing you is an actual billboard advertisement for plastic surgery in Rosemead, which is a city in the San Gabriel Valley, which is predominantly Asian. The image to the left shows a before image of the client with small monolithic eyes, darker skin, and a wider jawline. The after image, which is post-surgery, reveals a face with wider double-lidded eyes with blue contacts, lighter skin, and a narrow and angular jawline. Billboards are strategically placed in neighborhoods to advertise to that neighborhood specific demographic. And this is something that we need to think about, because when we see this in, say, Santa Monica, the trends of cosmetic surgery has definitely infiltrated the cosmetic industry and beauty products that are produced from that industry. So here you see a nose roller that is used to make the nose taller and less flat. And when I see this, it reminds me of my grandmothers and mothers and Southeast Asian mothers and grandmothers pinching their babies' noses, hoping that it wouldn't go flat. And what is problematic about these products, as you can see on the right, is that the packaging advertises a white model, which ultimately signals to Asian consumers that they need to look more white. So inspired by that, in this painting, The Nose Sharpener, I reference such beauty products that attempt to alter the face. I also reference in this painting Chinese feet binding as a form of early plastic surgery in which the small feet, small breasts, and small eyes dramatically contrast contemporary Western beauty standards. Yet I did not want the piece to capitulate to the beauty standards of dominant culture. I wanted a gesture of resistance and place a cigarette in the woman's hand as she casually uses the nose sharpener. So in my research, I looked at other products, such as skin lightening products and bleaching creams. And I noticed how the advertisements for these products strategically highlight whiteness as the desired effect. For example, if you look to the left, the face of the Asian model is divided into a lighter tone and a darker tone. The darker tone is a sliver on the right as the undesired portion. The whitening mud mask advertisement on the right features a blonde, blue-eyed model with fair skin, again signaling to women, especially women of color, that white is in fact beautiful and more desirable. So from that, I created this painting called Beauty Queen, where I begin to unpack the desire for lighter skin or even white skin. This painting depicts the image of a Korean beauty queen whose pre-surgery high school photo went viral. And in this image, the light porcelain-like skin is highlighted as her mascara-run face reveals an expression that teeters on both winning and losing. In this painting called In the Garden, reveals a violent struggle on the upper left-hand corner between two women who have had plastic surgery with Barbie doll hued skin, blue eyes, and large breasts, and a woman with smaller eyes and breasts who is resisting surgery. The piece hints at 19th century Japanese woodblock prints, and the roof is removed and windows and walls are purposefully skewed to heighten the viewer's sense of intrusive voyeurism. So a very common procedure for East Asian women with monolithic eyes is blepharoplasty. This requires the surgeon to cut into the eyelid, remove fatty tissue, and resew the skin to create a double lid, making the eyes appear larger. So there are cosmetic products that mimic blepharoplasty, such as this one that I'm showing you right now. They're eye tapes. So on this product, you can see on the left, the small monolithic eye, and after, as you can see in yellow, putting on the tape, the eyes appear bigger and more desirable. And this is highlighted by all the stars surrounding that eye. And believe it or not, there are also products such as eyelid trainers, and I'm not making this up, this is real, which are strategically designed. And here it shows the before and after effect, as well as the white model on the left, who essentially does not need the eye trainer, but is used to advertise the desired effect for Asian women with monolids. So from all this research, I made a series of over 30 drawings and 30 paintings and collages that was based on the research on plastic surgery on Asian women. The before and after pictures were very shocking for me and it was very haunting. The eyes after surgery became hyperbolically larger, less human, and even doll-like. But the procedure is very painful. And for those of you who even had any kind of surgery before, and looking at photograph after photograph, and image after image of cutting, bleeding, and suturing made its way into my work. This is a drawing based on a selfie I found of a Vietnamese woman who had undergone blepharoplasty. You can see the stitches, the surgical tape, and bruising, which remind me that this process of plastic surgery is in fact very violent. And in this drawing of an Asian woman performing blepharoplasty on herself, I wonder how much of this violence is self-inflicted. How much of it is imposed by external factors such as social pressure and beauty standards that are really impossible to achieve. And I ask this of you, when you look at yourself and what you choose to wear and how you present yourself, is this something that you choose, or is this something to appease social expectations? In this painting, I even asked the simple question of rejecting your own eye color, right? And putting on colored contacts. What is that about? And in this body of work, as you can see, I'm trying to explore experiences of resettlement, cultural displacement, assimilation, and even misrepresentation. I have been making artwork that probes the perceptions of Asian female bodies that consider the impact of plastic surgery. So through a series that I've shown you here today, I observe how cosmetic products and contemporary plastic surgery on Asian women prioritizes Eurocentric standards of beauty. The beauty industry and cosmetic surgery can also be agents of whitewashing that obscure ethnic and racial identity, amplify Orientalist eroticism, and fetishize Asian women. And I want to kind of shift gears and talk about my more recent work that goes back to how I began this conversation. And my more current work unpacks my very complicated journey in becoming American as I interview Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees and immigrants in my community. I make drawings on pink donut boxes and cross-stitch images of personalized California license plates with un-anglicized names. And this body of work was beautifully curated in a show by Rebecca Hall at the USC Pacific Asia Museum. So Rebecca, I want to give you that shout out. And this series began as an act of resistance to the Trump administration and its anti-immigrant policies that ultimately upheld racism. This work unpacks the complexities of immigration, displacement, and assimilation. And close to 90% of California's donut shops are actually mom and pop businesses run by Cambodian immigrants. The trend that links pink boxes and donuts can be traced back to the Cambodian American donut ecosystem that is ultimately rooted in the refugee experience. So this is a drawing of Mr. Rogers, as I mentioned, and I learned how to speak English by watching his programs on that television show. And he always began his show by singing, "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" A question that signals at belonging, but it also asks, who gets to belong here? So each drawing is meant to be a sensitive portrayal of a unique personal story that is hinged on post-colonial war trauma. Whether it is about someone like Mei Tao, who you see here, a child of Cambodian refugees who decided to come back home and rebrand her family's donut shop business, even after her parents wanted her to pursue a career in news broadcasting and paid for her college education at UC San Diego. Or somebody like Visal Uk, who was born in a refugee camp in Thailand to Cambodian parents and eventually resettled in underserved neighborhoods in Long Beach, where he entered gang life to protect himself from ensuing violence. After the death of his older sister, he was determined to transform his life. So he put himself through culinary school while working multiple jobs, and he eventually became a successful chef. Known as Chef T, Uk has held executive chef positions and at distinguished restaurants, and has volunteered for multiple community projects. Honey Hawk, known as DJ Honey, is a disc jockey from Long Beach who works as a phlebotomist while completing her college degree. She also started a nonprofit organization called Khmer, which supports the LGBTQ Cambodian community. And I make these drawings because I feel like they're not represented enough in the history and artwork that we learn here. And to expand on that body of work of pink donut box drawings, I wanted to center on the Southeast Asian refugee experience and made a series of cross-stitch images of California license plates. And California is the home to Asian America and the birthplace of Asian American activism. And with this particular piece, I want to emphasize the difference between an immigrant and a refugee. We need to make that distinction. Immigrants choose to come here, but refugees have no choice to come here and have to leave their homeland because their lives are at risk. So this cross-stitch California license plate series, I make feature un-anglicized names. And this was inspired by the countless occasions, and some of you may relate to this, where I could never find my name when I go to a souvenir, gift shop with mementos and souvenirs. And many immigrants change their names and choose to anglicize their names because they believe that assimilating into American culture is synonymous with assimilating into white dominant culture. But those are two different things. By keeping the name I was given at birth is a choice that preserves my cultural identity and the home my family was forced to leave. And as an artist, I really believe that artists are cultural builders. We don't just make pretty things. We are agents for positive change in our community. So my most recent work has purposefully integrated resistance and activism in art. And my commitment to social justice began quite early and is really rooted in being a refugee. And for those of you who remember, this is Mayor Tom Bradley, for you, those of you who grew up in LA. He was a hero. So this is the photograph of Mayor Tom Bradley and a sixth grade me in the late 1980s when I received third place for an Asian Pacific Heritage Week contest. We did not even have a month yet, it was only 1 week. And my drawing was about the Chinese Exclusion Act. How crazy is that? Most of the entries were of collages of like celebrating diversity, the American flag. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna make a drawing on the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I think like how crazy it is that the mayor allowed that drawing to be displayed and how much it meant for this young immigrant Asian girl to get this affirmation from this mayor. It was really important for me. So because of that and growing up with that and inspired by that, I've always wanted to make images of resistant matriarchs, mothers and aunties and Asian women who resist the stereotype that we are passive and compliant. This is a 19th century photograph of a Chinese woman with bound feet. Such photographs are typically taken by Western photographers who sometimes coerce their sitters so that their images can be taken back to the West. Very similar to the Siamese twins, right? Like, let's see how freakish these people are, right? And you can tell in her face and her body language that being photographed was not her choice. So inspired by that photograph, I made this painting called Resistance Matriarch. And I wanted to reclaim the power of the woman that you saw in that photograph. So I painted an image of her with a defiant gesture on a found painting that echoes the remnants of European easel painting. So today I'm showing you my second favorite Asian rap artist, okay? Expanding on my interests in women, gender, cultural, and ethnic studies, I made a series of drawings, paintings, and silkscreen prints to create images of Rocky Rivera in a project to collaborate with this amazing writer, rap artist, educator, and mother from the Bay Area. Rocky Rivera's lyrics express a range of social justice issues from gentrification to cultural appropriation. There is an unapologetic tension in being a feminist MC in a blatantly sexist industry in which Rocky usurps the stereotypical misogynistic framework of rap and re-empowers women. Rocky Rivera and I have similar experiences in cultural assimilation as immigrants and have embraced 1990s hip hop and rap as the music of resistance, as well as empowering our transformed identity to combat colonized and patriarchal mentalities, as well as white supremacy. So inspired by her powerful music, I reimagine Rocky Rivera as a contemporary Kali Ma, the Hindu deity who appears during the darkest times to rid the world of evil. She is traditionally depicted with beautiful dark blue skin, her tongue out, and with the heads of severed men. As creatives, Rocky and I are aligned with the mission to make art for the people. In October 2018, Rocky Rivera released her third album, which I made the cover art for, depicting her as Kali Ma with the heads of Proud Boys. Currently, I'm really honored to share with you that I'm in the process of finishing a very meaningful public artwork. In 2018, the LA County Board of Supervisors apologized to more than 200 mothers of Mexican descent who were coercively sterilized at the LA County USC Medical Center between 1968 and 1974. So what that meant was these Mexican moms would go to the hospital and give birth, and sometimes while they were laboring in pain, were given paperwork to sign, which they did not understand and did not have the place to even make that decision. And they were signing off on being sterilized. And they were as young as 23 years old. And to publicly express these apologies by LA County, I was commissioned to create an outdoor permanent artwork to ensure that this shameful history will never be forgotten and that the survivors are respectfully acknowledged. So because I can't show you the finished piece yet, I can only show you this digital rendering that I made while I was conceptualizing the work. The artwork is a circular piece that is 21 feet in diameter and made of corten steel. The designs are inspired by the arts and culture of Mexico with the words of the survivors on the surrounding wall. So I wanted this to be where you walk in, you can walk on it and engage, and you can read the words permanently in metal by the moms. One of them said, if you speak English, they treat you one way. If you don't speak English, they treat you another. And another survivor said, yo por dentro siento mucho tristeza, which means inside I feel a lot of sadness. And the final quote of the artwork, se me acabó la canción, which means my song is finished. So the intention for me is to create an impactful and contemplative piece for visitors to experience. At night, the artwork would illuminate to represent the mother's resilience and sobrevivir, which in Spanish means to survive and to carry on. And the title of the artwork is, in fact, sobrevivir. You know, part of the public art project that I completed involved me engaging with community. And so I invited folks, a range of folks from the community, to make a community quilt together about this history. And those who participated included students, they included mothers, they included activists, and women who gave birth at the hospital, and women who were part of Comisión Femenil, who worked tirelessly to support survivors in the class action lawsuit that demanded justice for the mothers. So this was such an honor to be able to engage and make work about such an important part of history that needs reckoning right now and healing. And this is an image of me sewing all the parts together. And I love how most of the participants have never made art before, and you don't have to be an artist to make art about something you care about. So I want to shift gears to what's been happening the last couple of years, and we're all in this together. When the pandemic forced us to quarantine and practice social distancing, I had to reconfigure how and why I was making art, just like you had to figure out how you're going to go to school and live your lives, right? And unable to connect with community was extremely difficult. However, as part of the campaign to support artists, I was commissioned by the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art to sew 200 masks from bed sheets and hair ties that were donated to a homeless shelter, the Midnight Mission. But what also happened during quarantine was a national reckoning with the pervasive and detrimental effects of systemic racism. Black and brown lives were lost to the brutality of police violence. And from the tragic deaths of so many innocent Black and brown folks was a social awakening that also dawned during the drastic rise in hate crimes that specifically targeted Asian American Pacific Islander communities, that was stoked by racist remarks from the last president who called the COVID-19 virus a Chinese virus. So last March, right before quarantine, and as we were beginning to understand the effects of COVID-19, my Asian American and Pacific Islander students expressed concerns about anti-Asian racism. And one of my students was called a gook. And in her confusion, she did not know what it meant. And as a Vietnamese refugee, this derogatory slur reignited traumatic experiences of resettlement deeply entrenched in racism. After my family survived intense war trauma as refugees and remade our lives in the United States, I remember playing with G.I. Joe toys. Now, as an adult, I realize how painfully ironic the experience was. So revisiting my childhood to include memories of the American War in Vietnam was central to the body of work that I recently made as a KaleidoLA City of Los Angeles Master Artist Fellow. And part of that fellowship helped me unpack the legacy of racist monuments in the United States. And I constructed a small white mixed media sculpture made of a dollhouse and G.I. Joe toys. And this the gestures and poses of these G.I. Joe toys remind me of many Vietnam War memorials and monuments, and how these toys eerily mimic the war machine and gesture at how we should remember the war. Since I came to the United States as a toddler, I cannot recall memories of my own, and I had to rely on the memories of my parents and the distorted representations in Hollywood movies such as Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket that asymmetrically retell the war in US history textbooks. And from this body of work, I also made snow globes that were based on the fall of Saigon in 1975. In preparation for the expected evacuation, the American Embassy distributed a book with a map that indicated the assembly areas where helicopters would be to land and pick people up. And I just want to read one page from that book. It said, note evacuation signal, do not disclose to other personnel. When the evacuation is ordered, the code will be read on Armed Forces radio. The code is the temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees and rising. This will be followed by the playing of I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. Those who were not US citizens but expected to participate in the evacuation contacted Americans they knew and asked them to sing the song. They were worried they might not recognize the song and not escape Saigon. So inspired by that historical research, I made these snow globes, and the one you're looking at right now is a photograph of my mom sewing in a refugee camp in Thailand, where we stayed for 8 months before resettling in Michigan. Now, many of us left with only the clothes we had on, and if we were lucky enough, we could pack maybe an extra set or two. And in this snow globe is me at the Thai refugee camp. And I started to outgrow my clothes. So my mom took one of hers apart and cut it apart and re-sewed clothes for me. And when we arrived in Michigan in December 1978, this is a picture. Uncle Dave, I hope you can see this. This is my family experiencing snow for the first time. And you know, there's no snow in Southeast Asia. And my sponsor, my godfather, is seen on the right, and he's showing my family how to build a snowman. And this is the final snow globe that I made. It's of my brother at the age of 11, his first Christmas. And I just think, oh my God, he must be so freaked out, like not knowing who this dude is sitting on his lap, right? So I always look at this photograph every year, so like kind of laugh about it. So in addition to my art practice, making art, as mentioned, I'm a community college educator, and I focus on serving disproportionately impacted students. And on my campus, those students are our DACA students, our Black scholars, our veterans, and our foster youth. And I make art and teach curriculum that represents them. The majority of my students are first generation college students, and most of them are immigrants. And so for the fiscal year, for the 2021-2022 fiscal year, I will be serving and have been serving as the creative strategist as part of an artist residency for the LA County Office of Immigrant Affairs. And my role is to use art as a tool to share government-funded resources with immigrant communities and help build trust with immigrant communities. And this role has given me the privilege to work with incredible folks who are dedicated to serving and supporting immigrants in Los Angeles County. And with the Office of Immigrant Affairs staff, we have attended community outreach events and hosted Welcome Day events for unaccompanied minors who had to cross the southern border. And at these Welcome Day events, we shared public resources and services such as healthcare, vaccinations, education, books, and legal services. We made 500 handmade cards with notes that let them know we welcome them and will advocate for them. And I assembled 500 art kits with brochures that listed various county resources to distribute. And I also facilitated art activities such as chalk art so that participants can feel comfortable, so that they can feel welcome and freely interact with their environment through art. I was also able to set up a station with the help of staff members and volunteers for a space for participants to make an interactive mural. And I gave each participant a piece of fabric and fabric markers to draw on. And that day we collected a little over 64 pieces. With all of these beautiful pieces created by children whose ages range between 3 and 18, imagine having to leave at that age, your home. I was able to sew 2 quilts from all of these beautiful pieces that the unaccompanied minor made that day. And now these quilts are displayed at the LA County Office of Immigrant Affairs, and we gifted the other one to Esperanza Immigrant Rights Project, who was our partner in supporting unaccompanied minors. So again, I just want to thank you, really for being here today and sharing space with me to share about my work. And I just want to end my presentation before I answer questions and have a conversation with you. This quote by my favorite author, Toni Morrison. And she says, I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. And for me, as an artist, an educator, as a mom, as a community activist, I try every day to live by these words. Thank you.